Greetings. The other day I went to our local vintage computer shelter, and she was the first thing I saw. She needs some help, and she probably had about, a week or 10 days left on her clock before she was going to get hauled off to the city dump. So I paid a modest adoption fee and brought her home. So she's dirty. She was looking at me with her soulful screen, which the digital camera is pretty good at hiding, but there's actually burning in this screen. You can see these dark lines, which is something pretty rare on a TRS-80. So, I mean, whatever they did with her, they just let her sit there for days and weeks and months with the same image on the screen. Her identity has been stolen. It proudly says Radio Shack TRS-80 Model 3, or it's supposed to say, but yeah, somebody made off with her identity. Keys seem to work. Seems to be in okay shape. Case is okay. It's got a lot of scrapes and tape residue, so its history has been removed. I'm assuming that its history was duct taped to the case, but somebody decided to remove it. Furthermore, her ground lug has been amputated, which is a really bad idea. Even though the neutral and hot plugs are polarized, but without the ground lug and you using enough force, you can put it in either this way or this way. And if you invert hot with ground with neutral, bad things will happen. So the first order of business, of course, is should we turn it on? No, use a variac, be careful, this, that. The former owner already insisted on turning her on. And, well, go ahead. If any spontaneous combustion happened and it disappeared, well, I guess better there than here. And she's not functional. So I got her plugged in. Let's see. Absolutely nothing. Let me make sure my power is plugged in. Well, the power strip wasn't plugged in. So here we go. Second time. Oh, and note the paw prints on the side. There's two more on top, which you'll see later. So she got walked all over. So here we go. Okay. That looked like it actually checked the first drive, then the second drive. That's the reset button. I didn't do anything. The screen is completely dead. No sound whatsoever and no high voltage. So we got some work to do. Let me just try the power one more time. See what it does. Oh, and this time both drives got selected briefly. And they're still running, and then they time out, and that's it. No life coming out of the screen. So let's start removing some screws and taking off the whole top of the case with the monitor. The monitor is actually attached to the top of the case, comes out. If you're doing anything similar, be very careful, because when you take the top out, make sure to lift it straight up. Don't tilt the case. because if you do that, there's a good chance that you shear off the neck board of the monitor, which is sticking out in the back, and if the case doesn't get pulled up, evenly, and the neck board snags on the back of the case, well, then we got an unrepairable tube. Well, here's the inside of the case top, and yeah, you can see what's going on in here. The driver board and the monitor. Nothing out of the ordinary here. Well, at least not on first glance. And the rest of the computer over here. So we need to check what's going on with the power supply over here. See if we're getting anything out of the power supply. And one other thing I noticed, the brightness and contrast controls are frozen. Solid. I mean, yeah, we didn't hear any sound come out of the monitor. We're going to check to see if at least the neck tube lights up over here. But first, let's check some voltages. So here's where we're at. That pigtail fuse in the monitor is blown. And I should have remembered this, but it has two power supplies. Identical power supplies. This one has some life in it. That one is completely dead. And finally, while I was at it, I had a closer look at the brightness and contrast controls, and they are completely frozen. So, well, I guess we should take out power supplies, bench power them, and see if we can find what's wrong with them. Well, I decided to free up the video controls pots first, because if we get the monitor running, we're not going to see anything because we can't adjust them. Now, contact cleaner didn't do anything. I could not move them. However, spraying IPA with the syringe into this part eventually freed them up, but I had to use pliers to get them to turn at all. But then after a while, this one turns. And this one turns. So we got one thing fixed. I spent some time looking at the schematics, scratching my head. But here's what I found. It does have, obviously, two power supplies, identical. This one powers, well, this one powers the disk drives, the floppy controller. So the motors and the floppy controller are powered by this, and this one outputs all voltages, plus minus 12 volts, even though 12 volts is not used on the floppies, minus 12 volts, and but 5 and plus 12 are present here. So that's why the drives would come on and then time out, I guess. Now the other power supply, the one that's hiding back here, powers the logic board and supplies 12 volts to the monitor. That's all the power the monitor gets. And it derives all of its voltages from that 12 volts. Then I found a boo-boo I made. The fuse, which I measured and it looked dead, I clipped one end of it, and then I looked at it. It had this cloudy plastic tube cover on it, and it looked like this was okay. So I remeasured it, and this fuse was not blown. But since it was being supplied by this power supply back here, and this supply being completely dead, there was no power going to the monitor. So all I got to do is solder this thing back into place. But there is some progress, because what I did, I just supplied power to the monitor from the good power supply, 12 volts. And so when I turn it on, here's what happens. Pay attention to the neck. It powers up. So giving it a little bit of warm-up, we get raster. So there wasn't anything wrong with the monitor after all. It just wasn't getting any power. And let's see. That's contrast, which doesn't do a whole lot without characters. But this is brightness. So the monitor's good. So far it looks like our main problem is the second power supply back here having gone bad. But it's getting late, and with the mistake I made with the fuse already, I think the universe indicates that I should stop here and continue tomorrow in the same video. Okay, it's the next day, and let's attack things with new energy. So in the last scene, after I turned off the camera, a loud popping noise came from the bad power supply. I can't see anything, there was no magic smoke, but something blew up. So what we are going to have to do is remove the disk drives and the disk drive tower to be able to get to the back power supply and see what's wrong with it. Now, the funny thing is, I haven't checked this yet. Let's see if the monitor still works. Oh, the tube lit up, and yes, it still works. Nothing's popping, nothing's exploding, so let me start removing screws. I removed the disk drives thinking that the back part here would let me stick my hand through to get to the power supply that was mounted on here, but no. The back of this thing is solid. So I did the unthinkable and read the manual, and it said you have to remove the chassis that houses all the logic boards over here. It is still attached with some wires, so I just kind of freed it and laid it down, and I was able to remove the bad power supply from here. And I think what I'm going to do is install the good power supply and see if the logic boards come up. Also, while I'm at it, I'll but I will replace the power cord. And it has some pretty long wires, so I'm going to try to do this the least painful way I can find. Here's the main logic board for your viewing enjoyment. So I gave it a new power cord, and it even went into the bushing correctly. So now I got to connect things and change out the reefer capacitors on both power supplies. I replaced the reefers here and here. They still measure good, but they're showing signs of cracking. So these are time bombs. I think I also found the source of the loud pop I heard. This is the bad supply. And this thing self-destructed. So what we're going to do next is install this one, the good one, to power the logic and the monitor, and see if we get any results out of that. And then we'll start looking at this. I worked on the defective power supply for a while, and this was the transistor here that blew its top. So I replaced it. I ran a fuse, clipped on a fuse here, even though this is a resistor fuse. For testing purposes, you can just put a fuse across it because this is open. And this resistor, let's see which one, yeah, this resistor started to smoke. So I took out the resistor, I checked the transistor, which was still good, and then started doing a bunch of checks on the capacitors, etc. And then I found that there was this TO220 transistor that feeds the primary of this transformer here, and this was completely shorted. I do not have one on hand, so I'm going to have to wait for a while till I get a replacement. I did more measurements and I couldn't find anything wrong. I did some comparison testing. There were some values in this area that were different than the other than the working board, but that's due to this transistor missing. And it's when you're doing in-circuit component checks, it's obviously going to show different values when there's a component missing versus a working board. So this is going on hold, and that's this. However, I wasn't going to sit by idly, and so what I did was I took the good power supply, which was mounted here and driving all of the disk stuff, and mounted it here on the back of the logic board. And this is this connector here, and this is the AC connection for the second power supply. But I plugged it all in, and my expectation here is, since now we actually have power for the monitor and for the logic board, let's see if the logic board comes on. And here we go. The neck tube lit up, and after waiting, we get a clear image. And it says cassette, and at this point you're supposed to either hit L for low, high for high memory, and it's supposed to continue, but it doesn't do anything. You're also supposed to power, when you power cycle it and you hold the brake key, it's supposed to go straight into basic. So I'm holding the brake key, and it goes back to the casting. As a matter of fact, the whole keyboard seems to be dead, except after pressing all the keys I found that the only key it responds to is the Q key. So that should give me enough of a hint to figure out what's wrong here. there are no active components on the keyboard. All of the buffers and the pull-ups and everything are on the logic board. So with the clues I've been given, I'm going to have to dig into the logic board and see what's happening over there and why the Q key is the only one with secret access. There is some progress to report. As you can see from the screen, I was able to get into BASIC, but the news is not so good because I basically used this to short the key contacts. So the logic board does work. Kind of, when I short the contacts. Now that stopped working too. Interesting, but yeah, there you go. Some characters show up. The solder joints are kind of tarnished, that's why. But as I'm sticking this and simulating key presses, so the logic board, again, it's reading the keyboard correctly, but the keyboard itself seems to be dead in the water. Well, we had to fix this keyboard. Now, we've done a similar repair in episode 73, where we fixed a Model 3 keyboard. And let me briefly summarize what the problem was. I mean, episode 73 shows you how to fix it, and I used pretty much the same approach here, but maybe we can have a look at this. So we have the contacts, and get some light in here. See, there's the two contact halves with two little bumps on a bump on each one. And the way it works, this plunger has a carbon contact in the middle. And when you press it down, see, this thing looks kind of like a miniature toilet plunger. And it goes in here. Oh, come on. And then this piece goes on top of it, and it pushes the plunger down, and the little contact connects the carbon. The conductive carbon disconnects the two contacts, and that's all. It's a simple momentary on switch, but the carbon contact has lost its conductivity. So we restore that conductivity with a piece of metal tape. Looks like self-adhesive metal tape. And when you test them now, they show full conductivity. And here are all the contacts opened up, cleaned, made conductive again, and ready to be installed back. I got to solder all the contacts back into place, clean the keycaps, which I haven't done yet, and then we should have a fully functioning keyboard. And that finishes up the keyboard. It's back in. All of the keys are working. And the screen looks good now that I was able to enter my standard BASIC program. So what remains we swapped that power supply to make the logic board and the monitor work. Now we need the other power supply to make the disk drives work. And that one sits here awaiting parts. And once parts come in, we'll make sure to get this to work and then get to work on the drives, which are dirty and creaky. Well, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And we'll see you in the next video.